um, So just to start us off, I'm gonna, our biggest announcement for the day is that we are presenting at KubeCon Europe. That's beginning of May, I believe May 4th to May 7th. And if you look at our agenda, you can get a link right to our specific event there. And then Edric, also, if you want to add our lightning talk to that, because we're also speaking at Edge Day, so that's only a quick 10-minute, correct me if I'm wrong, Edric, overview into Akri. And so it's really great, like to dip your toes into exactly what Akri is and what problems it aims to solve. So yeah, definitely check us out there. And then as always, if any questions about specifically anything we're talking about, you can reach out on Slack. Yeah, other than that, I think we can go ahead and start moving through some agenda items. And yeah, just to, let's see who all is here right now. We also could do some introductions if people want to go ahead and do a round. Since there's only a few of us today, I think we have some time for that, if people are comfortable with that. So I'll go ahead and start. My name is Kate. I'm I'm a software engineer at Microsoft and Akri's maintainer, and have been enjoying working on this so far. So I'll pass it off to Edric if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yep. Hi, everybody. I'm Edric. I'm the PM on Akri. Off to you, Roa.
Hi, everyone. I'm Roa. I'm a software engineer at Microsoft too, and one of the maintainers of Akri.
And yeah, I see we have one other person on the call. If you're comfortable introducing yourself, if not, that's totally cool as well.
Yeah, hello everyone. From Quebec City, Canada, Mohammed here. I'm software engineer as well, work with Tanis, and just curious about Akri.
Awesome. Well, our agenda is probably only gonna get us through a bit of the meeting today, so we'll have plenty of time at the end. If and I would love to hear like what brought you to Akri and any questions you have in particular. We're definitely really interested in growing our community, which we'll talk a little bit more about. But to start us off, right now we have a new discovery handler model that we just merged into main, so it hasn't been put into release yet, but we talked about it a little bit in the last meeting, but it's a really exciting change because now discovery handlers can live outside our agent, which does discovery on all of the worker nodes in a cluster, which means that you can now implement a discovery handler in any language of your choosing. So while Akri's core components are in Rust, and that has a bit of a steep learning curve for people who aren't familiar with it, now for most Kubernetes developers who use Go, you can now write discovery handlers in Go. And we have a simple grpc interface that those discovery handlers need to implement. And that's it. And if you are interested in implementing it in Rust, we have a template that you can pull down to quickly create discovery handlers. It even has the Docker file for building them. And via our Helm chart, you can easily deploy them by just passing in that image that was built. So that's really exciting, and we hope it makes it a lot easier to extend discovery for Akri, because the more things that Akri can discover, the bigger of a solution it provides. So very exciting stuff there. And then also with that, we made it so that now when you use Akri's Helm chart, by default, the agent that it uses is our slim agent, is what we're calling it. So which means that it's just the agent with no embedded discovery handlers. And then you separately deploy the discovery handlers that you want via the Helm chart. So I can show kind of the change in the way that you previously installed Akri. So previously, when you installed Akri, you would just set what configurations you wanted to apply. But now you specify what discovery handlers you want to apply by enabling that specific discovery. So here we're saying, okay, I want to install Akri with the UDEV discovery handler and with a configuration that utilizes this discovery handler and with this filter. So I want to only find USB video devices. We are still supporting an agent with embedded discovery handlers to kind of provide that experience that people previously may have had. In order to use the agent with those embedded discovery handlers, you simply specify that you want to use the full agent. And then the same flow for deploying your configurations per usual with our Helm charts. So we're trying to provide both.
Sorry, are you sharing your screen? Because I don't see.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was. I guess I was specifically sharing one screen here. I'll go over that again. Thanks, Roa. Here we go. Okay, hopefully people can see this now. It's just it's not very fancy. It's just a notepad. But I just wanted to show that if you do want to still use the agent with embedded discovery handlers, you'll specify that you want to use this full agent. Otherwise, you separately deploy discovery handlers by enabling that discovery handler to be deployed. And they'll be deployed as a daemon set, just like the agent. So they'll run on every worker node in the cluster. And then also we've changed kind of the syntax of our Helm charts to be more descriptive. So specifically, you're going to say, I want to deploy the configuration that uses UDEV with this filter. So in this example, we're saying we only want to discover USB video devices. And we've updated the documentation to match this. So this is just kind of an announcement that the experience with Akri will be different, but hopefully better. And with those announcements, which is a quick run through of a lot of our changes, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Edric to talk a little bit about how we can improve community outreach.
Thanks, Kate. So currently, in terms of community outreach, we have spent a lot of time focusing on the Kubernetes community. And as Daz brought up in one of the comments and on the Slack channel, there's definitely a lot of room for improvement and areas to extend into. I know that alongside of the Kubernetes community, we can do some work. We can do some work in the areas that might not necessarily be Kubernetes related, but can still benefit the project, like finding GitHub Action developers, finding Go and Rust developers, as well as other kind of areas that might not be Kubernetes specific, but can benefit the project. So kind of opening it up, are there any areas currently in the project that might not be Kubernetes specific, but might benefit from having more developers working on?
Yeah, I think you named a big one. GitHub Actions and our workflows in general. I think we could have some more eyes there. That's always something that we're iterating on and can be a pain point at times. So if there was someone out there who really enjoys that work and could help slim down our end-to-end tests in particular. So when someone puts in a PR, by default, we have end-to-end tests run of deploying Akri on K3s, microkates, and Kubernetes. And these are really long running tests, and they're in Python. And if someone were to be able to kind of slim them down, maybe make it more declarative so that we're only building things as little as possible, that would be great to have hands on that.
Okay. Kind of going with that as a suggestion, I think a good thing to have is a page of sort of like help wanted or areas that we can have people work on. Having a list of all that compiled might be a good place for other people to hop in. I don't know if it's, I guess in some sense we could put this in the issues page and then have it as a first PR, but at the same time, I guess having a dedicated page might be easier to kind of call out specific areas in general that we need help in. So that might be something that I can add into the repo, having a dedicated page on what we're looking for and areas that we can work on.
Yeah, I think if we had a an issue to point to for everything we wanted, that would be helpful. And we can obviously put like the help wanted tabs on it, tags on it, but it'd also be good to see what other projects are doing. I think we can do a little bit research there and find out how other projects are making it clear what areas they need help with beyond issues, and figuring out how to spread the word on.
That's a good idea. I think I should also reach out to like Deus Labs folks and see what they have done for other projects. I think for every project it's a little bit different, but for ours, because it overlaps a lot of different things, like alongside with Kubernetes, also devices, protocols, and other sort of embedded related things. There's all these other communities that we can also reach out to that might not be Kubernetes first, but that might also be interested in this. So I'll also look into that to see what other communities we can reach out to that are not Kubernetes first, but might be interested in using this.
Yeah, sounds good. Perfect. So I think we have more work to go here, and if people are watching this and find that they know of ways that projects have been able to reach out to community, definitely let us know. And more hands on deck would be great. With that, I'm going to pass it off to Brian to talk about some ideas or brainstorm some ideas around how we could modularize our repo. Right now, we have everything in one spot. Debatable whether that should be the prevailing scenario.
Thanks. I think from a high level perspective, there are a couple kind of obvious ways to go, right? We could split apart the core Akri into its own repo, and then have, especially now that the discovery handlers can be independent, discovery handlers, brokers into another repo, samples maybe into another repo. We've had suggestions for breaking out Swagger for our API. At the very least, maybe create a separate place for our grpc interfaces, so that somebody that is building in, I don't know, C++ or something doesn't need to pull in all this Rust code into their project just to be able to get our grpc interface. Those are kind of the areas that I have in my mind. I don't know, is there any other ideas for what else might be that?
I think one thing that I wonder about with breaking it out is it's just more places for developers to like toggle between. It seems like, because I've seen projects where they have like 5 different repositories and I don't really know where to start. And I guess part of that transitions into our next point of talking about is our documentation site. I think if we had a documentation site, it'd make sense, or I'd be more comfortable with breaking out into multiple repositories. But right now, it's our GitHub where people find all of our information. So I wonder if there's a way we can break things apart without confusing people who are trying to look at Akri.
Yeah, or maybe even like if, the motive, I don't know, I think we've heard before kind of that it would be nice to break out the brokers and stuff. I'm not totally sold on that being a need. The grpc, I wonder if, or the interface is Swagger grpc, I wonder if we could serve that up with GitHub pages in the same sort of way that we serve up the Helm charts, so that somebody wouldn't necessarily need to pull the whole repo. They could just pull like they pull a GitHub chart, in which case they could maybe build that way. I don't know, there might be other options too. I don't know if we could create I don't know, the packaging system for GitHub allows us to just sort of package a random file like a proto file or something, but maybe that's a way to go as well. So there might be other options if we decide that the code modularization isn't all that important to us, but still want to enable somebody to build C++ without pulling our repo. There might be other options that we can explore. And I feel like we looked into what K8 does, what Kubernetes at large does, and it seems like Daz suggested that that was a problem with theirs as well. So maybe what we're doing isn't uncommon. It'd be interesting to know if there is a good solution out there that somebody has created for this or found for this. Yeah, that's about all I got.
Yeah, I wonder how we, if we could maybe create an issue around this or start a thread on Slack. I think crowdsourcing what people want and are familiar with.
Yeah.
There's obviously not one solution, so that might get us closer to a better solution.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. The best idea.
With that, Edric, do you want to talk a little bit about progress on a documentation site?
Yep. So currently all the documentation is housed within the GitHub repo on the main Akri GitHub page underneath a docs folder. So something that I've been working on with Kate is a separated documentation site that is served up as a web page, sort of like a standalone website that has all the documentation. Some of the work that we've been working on was basically migrating the documentation into we're using Gitbooks as a CR or CMS for the content. So basically been taking some of the documentations and migrating it over to Gitbooks. And the idea is to, after having the Gitbooks all stood up to PR the folder structure back into the main repo so that it can sync between the two. So if somebody wanted to edit the website, they can basically do a PR into the main repo under the docs folder, and then it would update the Gitbooks website. Currently, we're a little bit out of sync due to we have a lot of new features, a lot of new documentation that hasn't been pulled into the Gitbooks CMS yet. So that's something I need to do to basically make sure that both of them are updated. Once they're synced, then we don't really have to migrate back and forth. They should keep I guess updated and synced. I think kind of going back to the point where Kate mentioned that it might be a great place to start for developers. I think if we do do the repo modularization in any way, that the documentation site would be very, very important, because developers need a central or like a first how to get started page. And if we had different repos, we need a single source of truth that basically lays out where you would go and what you need to do and which repos you need to build out the project.
Yeah, and I think on that point, with our documentation site, there's several different parts of Akri that there's a lot of different users for Akri. And I think the documentation site, hopefully the flow of it will clarify whether you're a discovery handler developer or someone who just wants to go ahead and use Akri as is or try it out, or whether you're someone who wants to create a broker to utilize discovered devices. I think we will have several different parts of the documentation, hopefully that will flow together. But I think it'll always be fluctuating, because we're going to learn what exactly people wanted to know more about as we go about it.
Mm-hmm. Going back to the points with the repo modularization, though, does anybody have any opinions? I know originally we wanted to have all the documentation living under the docs folder, so that with code updates that it gets you can do the PR alongside with the code itself. So both the website and the code itself is all kind of wrapped into one PR. If we're to do repo modularization, does that change the thinking around that? So should we have a separate repo for the doc site, or keeping it in the main repo is okay?
I think that's something we'll figure out down the line. I guess it seems fine to start with the docs to stay in like Akri core, whatever has the agent and controller, but we can always iterate and pull them out if needed.
All right. So, yep. So that's something I'm going to be working on. Basically, just doing migration and figuring out what the exact documentation and categories are going to be for the website.
And then, Mohammed, I see you putting out some awesome examples of projects that are doing some of this breaking down into multiple repos properly. I'd love if you're willing to hear your thoughts on just the modularization of repositories and also about like your experience with Akri's documentation, if you have had that, and what you think a good North Star for both of those would be.
Yeah, I just discovered Akri, so I'm in the process of discovering. So, but I saw multiple projects using it. It might be a good idea to start put everything in the same repo until you define your strategy, and then you start to split up.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Instead of rushing into something modular, figuring out exactly what that breakdown would look like. And thanks for dropping in, Dapper. We'll take a look at that and see how they have split theirs up, and maybe have some direction from that too. Yeah, those were our main agenda items. We can do some issue triage, but before we do that, maybe we can take a moment to see if anyone else has any other items or talking points that they want to bring up, and we can also circle back after issue triage too.
I think the thing that I'm curious about, Mohammed, I'm curious about your initial thoughts about around Akri, like the scenarios that you see that might fit for you and where you might use it.
Probably in 2 months, we'll be having a project where we'll be using drones to capture some images. So I might be looking for something that capture image on the drone and retrieve the image and into like a gateway and go from that.
We've heard some groups before talk about wanting to discover these drones and propagate their images into the cluster. But from the last time we discussed it was the protocols that these drones speak are fairly complex. Would you say that's the case? Like, what protocols are you currently using to communicate with these drones?
Honestly, I'm not aware of the protocol yet because our project did not start it yet, but I'm documenting it ahead. So
yeah, and I think even if it is a fairly complex protocol that's pretty specific to one type of drone, hopefully our new discovery handler model makes that a little simpler. But that would be great to get Akri discovering like aerial footage devices, and there's been some other thoughts on that side too. So definitely very interesting.
Yes. Thank you.
Awesome. With that, Roa, would you be willing to lead issue triage?
Sure, Kate. Let me share my screen.
I think I might need to give you access. 1 second.
Sure.
There you go. You should have host now.
Yep. Can you guys see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Do you want to go through this view or a different view for the issues?
Maybe go to the projects view. I pulled them all in, so it should be updated.
Okay, awesome. So let's go with trash needed ones. So this is the first one. Okay, let me just move my. Brian, since you commented on this one, do you want to tell us more about it? So this says consider rename of configuration.shared. Seems like you opened the book.
Well, we've talked about whether shared is the right nomenclature or word or whatever to use for the idea that we're expressing here, right? This is at a configuration level, I don't know, at a discovery handler level, you're deciding whether or not the thing you're finding and controlling, I don't know how to explain it even, maybe this is the problem, right? So we are providing a resource that either only one device can have access to or multiple devices can have access to. And across those two concepts, there's this idea of we want to limit the access, right? The capacity. So is that a concept that you are sharing the device? Is that a concept that you are limiting access? How do we want to describe that? Is it, you know, conceptually, you could describe the actual device rather than our functional interaction with it and say it tends to be connected. If it's not shared in today's ideology, it tends to be connected or attached or I don't know. Whereas, so you could describe it that way, connected versus disconnected, or we could be more general, right? And say, number of, the field could be something like attached, and it could, or not attached, connection type, right? And it could be disconnected or connected or internet or, you know, bus or whatever, right? So we could go in a lot of different directions where the, right, you know, right now we're just shared and it's true or false. So that really just gives you kind of one set of information, but you could come up with a way to have lots more information, right? You could use an enum instead of a Boolean. You could, so I don't know. That is the crux of the bug. How do we like communicate this in a way that is less likely to be radically changed in the future by some new thing that comes along? And I tend to lean towards we should get out of the Boolean business in favor of an enum, but I don't know what the other side of that enum, what the name of the enum should be, right? And what the name of it is then sort of aligns to what the values of it should be. So I don't know, that's where we are.
And I think to elaborate, I think the reason why we've stuck with shared for so long is because the way we respond to a device being visible to multiple nodes or one nodes is a Boolean response, in the sense that our instance is either shared by multiple nodes or it's not. And that instance is what's managing the usage of the devices. So on that instance, multiple nodes may be allocated slots to use that device, or maybe just one node is. So the way we respond to the device being locally attached is that each node gets its own instance, versus if it's a shared device, then all the nodes are sharing one instance. And that's because our instance is supposed to be a direct representation of the device. So shared makes sense on a development side, but it's not descriptive to a user of Akri, which is why an enum that mapped to kind of a shared value would make sense.
Yeah, I see Brian's point also about like how this should be attached also to the capacity, because they kind of go together, right? To some degree. So what do you think should be the right action? Should we just keep it for, it seems like what we need here is kind of a more flushed out proposal, I guess. Does that seem like a good next step?
I think putting it under investigating for now makes sense. I think this is something that, as we have more people exposed to our documentation, they might have thoughts like this would make sense if this was just named this, or as we try to explain it to more people, maybe it'll become clearer for us too. But I think that issue really is starting the conversation.
Okay, sounds good. So next we have, I think it was opened by Daz, goes along with what Brian was discussing. Please consider a standalone repo for protocols. Yeah, that's something we're looking at, thinking about. Should I put it in backlog for now, since we know that that's something we probably need to work on, but we don't have plans for that yet?
Yeah, I think that seems like a good place for it.
Okay.
Contemplate
good.
renaming it too, right? That maybe standalone repo isn't necessarily how we end up doing this, but the concept is somebody wants to be able to access this without pulling in the entire repo, right? So,
Yeah.
or maybe just add a comment there. It doesn't have to be a
can add a-
standalone repo.
Yeah, I think it was with the context of like imports for Golang. It's easy to, if it's in its own repo, it's easier. Well, you could always just curl the one proto file, but yeah, it works a lot better with Go. And then this was the weird part, was that Kubernetes isn't doing that. So for their device plugin proto file, I had to dig through their repository to find it. That wasn't the best experience given how large theirs is. So yeah, definitely having a separate place for these makes sense.
Yeah, so it looks like Daz added some details here. Brian, do you have a suggestion for the rename? Or should we keep it as is until we get to it?
I don't have a real good suggestion. I mean, it's obviously I stumbled over what I was saying, so I don't have a concise way to say it.
Okay.
I would maybe just a comment in there and be like, another option other than a standalone repo might be some way to host the file somewhere.
Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, going back here. So we have an issue opened by one of the community members about Cubectl. The issue is about Akri not working with Cubectl. Kate, I know you've been investigating this. Should I put in investigating, or do you have any updates on this?
Yeah, I think we should definitely tag it with an enhancement tag. I just jumped into the Cubectl Slack, and they said they're supporting an edge size list and watch interface that you have to configure in your Cubectl cluster, but I haven't found, I responded asking for some documentation on that and haven't received it yet, except for maybe I just did. But definitely looking into that. Yeah, not yet.
I also don't see like in their code or anywhere related to Cubectl kind of the concepts that the Rust cube in cluster creation bits require, right? So there's some environment variables that are just kind of expected if you're established in a cluster that just don't seem to exist for Cubectl. So I think there might be some like structural issues that might be a challenge for us there.
But at the same time, we're using such an old version, I mean, a fairly old version of Cube, like the Rust crate, that maybe there's different settings and configurations.
So they're like, those two things are pretty, they seem to be consistent across several different interfaces for how to access Kubernetes. I don't know, fingers crossed, but I kind of feel like those environment variables are the way people tend to establish cluster connection, right? It's like a connection to the API server, essentially.
Yeah, I definitely don't think this is going to be trivial. So it'll be an ongoing investigation for sure.
Investigating?
Yeah, I would say investigating.
Okay. Okay, so next, I think that applies to the next 4 issues we have here. They're ones that were auto-generated by our security audit. They're enhancements because of we're using, they're kind of their warnings, not errors. So it's okay to not fix immediately. So mostly they're about crates that have been deprecated or crates that are unmaintained. So we should move to using other crates. So I'll go ahead and move all those as first-time issues. Any other thoughts?
No, I think that's a great idea. I think
Yeah.
those are perfect first-timer issues.
Okay. And should I move them to backlog or just keep them? Or should I put help needed or like any other tags, I guess?
I think
backlog
help, yeah,
and
backlog
with
works. And
is
then,
also.
sorry, Brian, did you say help needed
I would
also?
say all of the above sounds like a great idea. Into backlog, help wanted, good first time issue. Those all seem like perfect things to label it with to me.
Okay. So I can do that. Do you want to start discussing the last one while I update the labels for those ones?
Sure.
So the last one we have.
Oh, sorry. I
Okay.
thought you were saying you wanted someone else to lead it while you're doing that. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, sure. I opened the issue so that you can see it.
Okay, great.
So the issue states include Akri configuration instances and Cubectl get all. That would be convenient, I guess. Kate and Brian, thoughts?
I feel like that isn't
Sounds good.
that shouldn't be too tricky to do. Right, Brian? You were the one who added like the short names and stuff for configurations and instances. I would assume it would be something similar along those lines.
Yeah, I feel like when I eyeballed this, Daz had like the solution in here, I thought.
Yes, I think so too. Yeah, it's a straightforward. Yeah. Does that suit looks
Yeah.
like a good first time issue, I guess?
Yeah, definitely.
Does Cubectl get all only apply to the current namespace you're in? I mean, I guess you probably can specify the namespace as
Probably.
well, but
I would expect it to just be the default namespace, unless you specify minus capital A or minus namespace equal blah.
I wonder if some people
Then
might
move it
find
to
that.
backlog.
Yeah, that sounds good. I wonder if people may find that annoying though. Say like they like their current, like, is that something you can toggle? Like, hey, I want this to be an all or I don't.
I imagine it is, since our Helm chart is installing the CRD, but I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know that the CRDs get the value replacements.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I don't know how common it is to include it and get all, like for other like open source projects like Akri.
Well, we could do
Is it common?
We could do a search in GitHub to see if other people are adding that blob of text to their CRDs, and if we can sort of discuss at that point, like, oh, nobody else is doing this, maybe there's a reason, or yeah, here are all these other projects that are doing it, so let's go for it. Or we can do it until we get complaints.
That's true.
I mean, I don't run get all very often, so it doesn't seem that bad to me to shove our stuff in there. I kind of expect it to show up, frankly. I kind of expect everything to show up in get all.
Yeah, I mean, you're asking for everything, so that makes sense. Like, okay, let's add that to everything.
Can I jump in? Get all Kubernetes, get all. I work in multiple Kubernetes. It never worked because we work only into one namespace. We are restricted to one namespace, and we can execute usually the Cubectl get all for this specific namespace, and you never have access to the other namespace unless you are administrator.
Okay, that's a good clarification, that it is namespace specific. So would you say you use it a fair bit then? And would you expect everything to be a part of that? So I guess in short terms, do you think that's something that we should enable, is that all of our configurations and resources come up when you execute kubectl get all?
I don't know if you are intending to install Akri into separate namespace or within the name operation and namespace.
Sorry, will you repeat that again?
I don't know. Your the CRDs would be installed into Akri namespace, or you are. I didn't take a look to Akri that much, so
I think by
I
default,
would,
all to the default namespace.
Yeah,
yeah, actually,
maybe that was what we should do, right? I think it's the conventions to deploy to a specific like namespace. I think that's what
yes,
Muhammad is saying.
yes, default is
and
never
then-
allowed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like we can put up another issue, and that's definitely
Mhm.
we should be having everything go into like an Akri namespace, or have someone be able to specify a different namespace if they want.
I think Helm allows you to install to a different namespace. So I think that it is possible to, but maybe we should default to, Akri.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw people really doing like Cubectl get all and then -a to get all namespaces. So that should work if we do this, and I think it will address and Daz's feedback. I think that seems to be the most common practice.
Makes sense.
Okay, let me tag it. More details later. So with that, I think we're done with our issue triage. Back to you, Kate, and for closing.
Awesome. So we have 13 minutes left in the meeting. Does anyone have any other points that they want to bring up? I guess one thing I was thinking about when we were going through the triage was I was thinking about the security audit action you created, Roa. And I think through our process of working with Akri, we've kind of found roundabout solutions to making our developer experience easier with GitHub. And we also have an Akri blog that is being underutilized. So I think it'd be really cool if we tried to get that going, and even found like contributors who were just interested in contributing to our blog, because I think there's some learnings that we can share. And when we do release our latest discovery handler model, I'll definitely put up a blog about that. And maybe that can kickstart us back into using that. But it'd be great to talk about just various parts of the project and things that we've discovered there, even if they're just like quick 1-paragraph blurbs.
Yeah, sounds like a great idea, Kate. Yeah, I can write a blog post about that.
Cool. All right, with that, I think we can end 10 minutes early. And thanks everyone for spending the time to either join or watch this, and we'll see you first Tuesday of next month.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Bye everyone.
Bye.